Let me turn first and recognize myself and ask you, do you consider wildfire a threat to public welfare?
Wildfire, certainly in the last several years we've seen an increase in the size of wildfire and the number of large wildfires. We have a graphic. We've seen the number of fires over 100,000 acres increase pretty dramatically since 1990. You can see in this graph here the increase since 1990. The blue diamonds indicate the number of fires over 100,000 acres. Those are the very expensive fires. Those are the very troubling fires. And many of those fires are the ones that we're talking about, like in Southern California, with nearly 2,000 homes burned just in the last week and a half.
May I ask, do you think that CO2 emissions are, without question, contributing to global warming?
I'm not a scientist, but I can say that we have measured certainly CO2 emissions from fire. We've measured carbon monoxide and methane, along with other volatile gases, and they should be of a concern to all of us.
Well, it's 6 months since the Supreme Court rendered its decision in Massachusetts versus EPA, asking the EPA to make a ruling on whether or not CO2 is a danger. And it has yet to do so, and as a result has yet to have to then make decisions as to what it's going to do about it. So that really does create some problems for us. I solicited some questions online yesterday, and I wanted to share one with you from someone who lives in Missouri. He was concerned that as global warming widens the area subject to wildfire conditions, it could reach into areas of his state and other states that are not used to having wildfires and are ill-prepared to fight them. If climate change expands the number of areas at risk of wildfires, it could take many communities by surprise. What areas of the country should begin to contemplate wildfires for the first time, and what can be done to educate other communities unaccustomed to wildfires?
Well, the Congresswoman from Michigan mentioned the Lake States, and certainly we had some pretty active fire in northern Minnesota this summer. The northern latitudes in the boreal forests are experiencing some of the greatest change with climate change, and certainly we need to be paying attention and focus there. The drought across the southeast United States right now in Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, we're experiencing drought and fire danger in a way that those communities are not accustomed to in October of a year. The fire that burned out of the Okefenokee swamp this spring and burned so many acres in Florida, creating not only a huge health risk, but certainly destroying a lot of people's livelihoods, burned a lot of private timber, and fortunately when it hit some treated lands, some areas where the hazardous fuels had been reduced, we were able to suppress that fire. But there are communities, not only in the northern latitudes and in the boreal forest, where climate change is most pronounced, or we expect the effects to be most pronounced, but certainly there are communities experiencing prolonged fire seasons that may have been prepared for a 2 or 3 month fire season and are now looking at having to prepare for a much longer fire season.
And one final question. Recently, Centers for Disease Control Director Julie Gerberding testified before the Senate on the impacts of climate change on public health. In her draft testimony, she stated that because of climate change, quote, forest fires are expected to increase in frequency, severity, distribution, and duration. The Bush administration removed that statement from her final testimony. Do you agree with that statement?
I think we can demonstrate higher severity, larger fires, and certainly over the last 7-8 years, more frequent fires and a longer fire season.
Okay, well, I thank you for that testimony.